Welcome back to Razmavsar TV. Today, I'm having a special guest, Caleb Hallgren. Hi, how are you doing, Caleb?
Hi, Dr. Harsani. I'm doing well. I'm on vacation right now. I'm enjoying the northern Minnesota, so get to relax in the North Woods.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Is it cold now, or it's not really cold at the moment?
It's not that bad. Not compared to at least being far up north. It's, I think, in like the 50s during the day. It gets down to the 30s at night.
Okay, perfect. But in winter, it's really
Fahrenheit.
cold. Yeah, and in winter,
yes,
it's very
it can
cold.
get very cold up here.
Okay, very good. We are going today to talk about your, different topics we are going to talk about. We are going to talk about your martial arts experience. We are going to talk about HEMA or Western or European martial arts and armored combat you do. And what I'm also very interested in is also your background in American military. So you would we will talk about that. I leave the order to you. I mean, 3 topics, all somehow related to each other. Which one you would like to start? Caleb, please, I leave it up to you.
Let's start talking about my fencing experience. I think that's probably most germane to the listeners of this channel, and then we can transition to the other ones.
Perfect. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I started out doing martial arts when I was young in middle school, and my friend, one of my best friends, his father ran a martial arts school, which was a variant of Hapkido. It was called Chungdo Musulwan, and very heavy on joint locks and wrist escapes and things that are normal hallmarks of Hapkido. And I really fell in love with the sword part of it. And over the years, I did that. And after a while, I was doing too much sword stuff for my teacher, and he said that I needed to do more empty hand stuff instead. And me being kind of an arrogant young guy, I said, well, I guess I'll find a sword school then instead. So I looked around for kendo schools. I looked around for fencing schools, and I was in a college town for a public university. And public universities in the United States, they often open up their club sports to the general population. And so I found the fencing club at that school and reached out to them. They said I could come, and I fell in love with it the very first day. So did sport fencing there and really fell in love with it. Like I said, one thing that was nice about it was that it was a very open-minded club, and they didn't really do much electrical fencing. They would do dry fencing, which was with judging and on your honor. So they were also open to historical stuff. And this was around 2001, 2002, where that was when the WMA scene, the Western martial arts scene, was really starting to come into the public consciousness, or at least larger public consciousness. So I know a number of the people there had John Clemens's first books, and so they had that, and they were interested in playing around with those. And then I also found Guy Windsor's first book, The Swordsman's Companion, on the shelves at my bookstore, and so I picked that up and really just started tearing through that. And I found Christian Tobler's first book, the German on German longsword fencing, at my local library. So between the two of those and my friends in the fencing club, I really just started becoming involved in the WMA scene at the time. And I think now they call that the Forum generation, where that was when Sword Forum International and myarmory.com were really the centers of discussion about the historical martial arts world and where people got the information for it. So I got involved with that. And me and the people at my fencing club, but also my friends from school, we got aluminum longswords, because aluminum longswords were very popular at the time as well. So got Valentine Armory and Swordcraft's aluminum longswords and aluminum arming swords, and we're working from the manuals and playing around with those and talking on Sword Forum. And really that went on for most of my high school time, and then into college, where I also became involved in a classical fencing club once again, which was very orthodox classical. That was at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And one thing that was really cool about that was I got a chance to see how a club works in a place that also has a very aesthetic and traditional sort of very, aesthetic to it, because this was in the attic of an old Turner's Hall. It was basically kind of a German community center in the 1800s. And
Caleb,
so it was
may I
a
say
dark,
something? May I say something?
yeah,
I know Marquette University.
really,
Yeah,
it's a good place.
very good place. And I was
Yeah.
there a couple of times, so it's so
Yeah.
interesting to hear that. Okay, go ahead, please. You're right. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So the instructor there, his name was Alexis Lajoie. It was in this musty attic ballroom. So it really had the feel. You got the feel like you were in an 1800s fencing club when you were there, and but like I said, very orthodox, very very tight movements, very about as disciplined of a fencing club as you can probably get in the classical mindset. So did that in college, and then I endured a series of shoulder injuries. So that kind of took me out for a while, and I was doing the military ROTC commissioning program in college. So I took a break from fencing between the injury and me joining the military. And during that time, I was my first stint in service. I really got into more firearms related stuff. I still kept some of my gear, but took a break from fencing and did firearms competition. I became competitive in the 3-gun competition, and then did my first stint in the military. Got out, came back in. Let me know if you have any questions during this time.
Sure,
I'm kind of going on a long story.
No,
So. Yeah, I did my first stint in the military, then got out and went to grad school. I should say grad school. I decided to begin studying for my pre-med, and then decided I wanted to go back to being in the private sector. And at that time, I moved to California, and the guns that I was training with for 3-gun were not legal in California. So I decided, hey, let's get back into fencing and go get back into swordsmanship. And I was very lucky to be near the Tattershall School of Defense in Long Beach, California. And I decided I'd jump back into the HEMA scene, or the WMA scene, and found the Tattershall School of Defense, went there. And at the time, and to this day, the head instructor is a guy named Gary Chelik. And I was really blown away by how incredible him and Jeff Jacobson, the 2 co-instructors of that school, how well they understood and taught Italian rapiers. So I fenced Gary, and he was just transcendent in his ability to fence. And I said, I have to learn how to fence like that. I have to learn this because this person is so incredible at this. I have to fly close to the sun and see how close I can get with Italian rapier. So got involved in that and started really doing that along with the SCA, the Society for Creative Anachronism, which also has rapier fencing in it. So really dove headfirst into that, and did probably 3 practices a week with the SCA, and then another private coaching with Gary for a good 2 years, and really have continued in the SCA, became an associate instructor with the Tattershall School of Defense, and really have been very heavily involved in that ever since. I've done Italian rapier. Italian rapier is really my first love for the second time of swordsmanship, but I'll do everything. And I also do Swetnam rapier and dagger with the English style from the 1617 manual, and then really just studying everything and anything I can with Italian rapier and other weapons. I got my Master of Defense, which is the highest level of recognition you can get for fencing in the SCA, just last year. And I also just completed, I think 2 days ago or 3 days ago, an apprenticeship with a guy named Robert Childs. He goes by Torataka in the SCA. He's a very high ranked rapier fencer in HEMA and in the SCA. So getting another vector into rapier. And I've also recently become involved in harnish fectin with HEMA. So I'm kind of a man of many interests, but really, I think they all kind of feed into each other and allow me to have a lot of fun with both swordsmanship and research.
Have you ever tried destreza, Spanish rapier?
I know a little bit about it. I've never been around a good how to put it. I've never had the opportunity to train with a really good destreza school in person. I think the closest that I've had any kind of exposure to destreza is, and I know it's kind of controversial to call Thibaut destreza, whether it is or whether it isn't, but learning a little bit of Thibaut from Sean Franklin at a school, at a tournament that I was at, that was fun. And I think actually delving into Thibaut will probably be one of my next journeys in historical fencing. So like I said, I'm not sure whether I'm going to be raising some eyebrows by calling Thibaut destreza. I know it's influenced by destreza and it has a lot of the hallmarks of it, but I'm not sure how much people would really call it that.
Okay, very good. And are you also, or have you ever practiced side sword as well?
Yes. So I've done, Gary Chelik is also well known for Bolognese side sword. I've played a little bit with it. I've worked on the Manciolino manual before. One thing that's kind of difficult for me coming from the Italian rapier world of learning from Giganti and Fabris and Alfieri and Capoferro is that a lot of the Bolognese manuals are structured very differently about how to approach combat in the problem solving process. So it's much more, for me, it's like when you read a Manciolino, it's like he's describing a kata rather than kind of a he does this, they do that, he does that, they do that sort of structure that Italian rapier has. So it's a very different mindset that is, I think, more challenging for me. But it's in my interest lane, but it's just not something that I would call myself formally trained, because someone would probably call me out and make me look like a fool.
Okay. What about longsword? Are you interested in longsword?
Longsword was what I first did way back when I was doing fencing in high school. So I remember I really fell in love with Christian Tauber's first book on German longsword. The way that he described the Meisterhau and going from the Ringeck verse and the Meisterhau, and really how to counter different things and general strategies. It really appealed to the way that I wanted to approach fencing at that time. So I really loved doing German longsword then, and I still have a fair amount of knowledge of it. So I would say at the end of the day, outside of rapier, I probably have the most knowledge of longsword than kind of as a second weapon. So, and I think that fits the scene, the current HEMA scene. But it's a lot of fun, and I love German longsword. I've been, in fact, the Tattershall school that's nearest to me in Tulsa, Oklahoma, will be hosting an instructor for the Wisconsin Historical Fencing Association. His name's Aaron Pennenberg, so he'll be coming down and teaching a seminar on the Meisterhau in January. So I'm really excited to kind of refresh my knowledge with that. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Perfect. So let's go to armored combat, because you are also into armored combat. First of all, what type of armor do you have? German, Italian?
So I didn't really start out with wanting any particular style. The head instructor of the Tattershall school in Tulsa, John Epler, he recommended to get cheap armor that fit first, so that you can train in it while you order a more expensive full harness for what you want later. So right now, the current harness that I fight in is, I would probably call Vaguely Western European. It's a male hauberk with a globose breastplate on top of it and a bassinet with an aventail kind of regular spalders, and then plate arms and plate legs. So I would call what I currently have vaguely Western European. It probably won't raise that many eyebrows as being a hallmark of any particular area. It doesn't have like a super German clap visor or fully encased upper legs like you would see of an English armor. So, but I currently do have a harness on order with Maxim Suprovich, and which is based on the 1450 Friedrich I armor, which is a Milanese export armor. It's in the Austrian. It's in one of the Austrian museums in Vienna, and it's got a great bassinet, and it's, like I said, it's a Milanese export armor. It doesn't have anything. I think that also is probably a little bit agnostic as far as what region it could be in, because the Milanese exported their armor all over the place. You know, they had their home industry, and then they just sent it everywhere. And that's one thing I learned a lot when I've been looking at the stuff from Tobias Capwell, talking about the armor of the Wars of the Roses, and how English armors were very different, how they had the homegrown, like, top level armor, but they also had quite a great deal of imported armor as well. So I think that'll be ultimately the harness that I'll be fighting in, probably more often than not, as soon as it arrives, will be that 1450s Italian Milanese export armor from Western Europe.
There are many armor league competitions or tryouts or whatever. I mean, so not nowadays, but we have basically one which they do like in Harnischfechten in HEMA scene, right? And one which is done in a Battle of the Nations style, and one which is done in SCA. Okay, yeah. I know the Battle of the Nations quite well, and I know also the HEMA Harnischfechten quite well. How do people in SCA fight? Because I only saw SCA guys when I was invited to teach in New Zealand. That was the first time I saw SCA people. But so how do they fight in Harnischfechten or in armor?
Yeah, so generally in the SCA, it's called either armored combat. There's kind of three ways you can call it. You can call it armored SCA combat. You can call it rattan combat, because that's the material that their weapons are made out of. Let's see, or you can call it heavy combat. So really, any given one of those things, that if you call it in the SCA, you're referring to the same thing. But I would say the big differences between the other disciplines that you mentioned and it are that in the SCA, doesn't really restrict the material type that it can be made out of. Now, at least I'm talking about for the main rattan combat. So you can have what people call pickle barrel armor, which is made out of that high density plastic that pickle barrels are made out of, and then they'll make like a lamellar armor out of that. Yeah. Or it can be made out of titanium. It can be made out of, like I said, different kinds of polymer. Can be made out of aluminum. Ultimately, so yeah, different materials. You can get away with a much lighter armor, or you can get away with wearing much less armor. So you can have where people call it a hip belt that protects your kidneys, and you have your helmet, and you have I think you have to protect your elbows in some ways. So it's much I think less restrictive about that. And then you're hitting with a rattan stick, which is wrapped in tape and can have a basket hilt, or you can have a clamshell gauntlet that protects your hand with a much simpler hilt. And the target area is from basically the top of the knees on up to basically everywhere in your body. I may be wrong about the hands, but anyway, otherwise cutting, thrusting are allowed. You have to hit with a certain degree of force. Now, that was initially based on the idea of being able to penetrate through a male hauberk. I think now with modern research, you have to suspend a certain degree of disbelief in the idea of cutting through a male hauberk with a gambeson underneath it with a normal sword. But nevertheless, I think there's a great deal of subjectivity about how hard a hit has to impact in order to be a good hit. But nevertheless, people enjoy doing it, and I would say it's, when I approach it, and I have done it, it's something where I kind of see it more like reenacting a historical sport, what historical sport combat would have been like, rather than necessarily reenacting what historical battlefield combat would have been like. And it's a great workout. It's a ton of fun, and a lot of people who do it become just incredible fighters and incredibly well coordinated with great cardio. So ultimately, I see it as fun and an enjoyable workout, and simulating sport combat, but probably not what most scholars these days would call what historical combat really looked like in the past.